This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z. Why? Because I have to. Just kidding, because I really wanted to. And because my friend Sean Tipping asked me to let him on.
Please.
No, really. I begged him to come on. He had a good idea. And so we're going to find out what that idea is. First, we'll hear a message from our sponsor, NAPA Auto Tech Training. Are you tired of searching for trained technicians? If so, let NAPA Auto Tech help you build a technician with their Build-A-Tech program. Kind of like Build-A-Bear. These 3-day courses cover one of 4 individual topics: brakes, electrical, steering and suspension, or HVAC through a combination of classroom lecture, hands-on, and utilizing training mock-ups. Visit napaautotech.com. Well, thanks for coming on again, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. Always glad to be here. Always good to talk to you.
You could just call me.
What fun is that? I want everyone to hear our conversations. Yeah, I mean, not everything needs to get voiced to the entire world, but I would say, honestly, our conversations on the phone are pretty close to the same as what we do on the podcast.
We should just record all of them and then we can just release them back and forth.
Yeah, that's a lot less work too. So just drive around, record an episode. All right, I'm done for the week.
I'm liking what you're saying. Less work. More time for Elden Ring.
Yeah, how is work going? I saw you cloning a BMW transmission.
Well, let's preface that a little bit. Attempting to clone a EGS out of an 8 HP 50 on a 2018 G30, or for the most of us, 2018 BMW 530i that I used. Luckily, I got my hands on the original one. Spent a lot of time going through a lot of cases to find the right tool to pull, or at least attempt to pull flash data, EEPROM data off of it without opening it up. And even if I opened it up, I'm not sure I would know what the target device is and would it be worth all that work.
Yeah, I think those ones are sealed up pretty good.
Yeah.
Even if you get in there.
I got something. I don't know if it's right. 2 different tools pulled data. The hex data matches. So they either got it right or they're both got it wrong the same way.
Sure. Unlikely, but possible.
Yeah, and it's an X drive. So since the transmission's already fully installed, the getting to the connector to just hit power, ground, can low is almost impossible. So
so the car came to you with the used one already in it?
Yeah. So I ordered a connector to just pop in there and then I can label it however I want. Because I think there's 2 or 3 different versions where pins are located. I think power and ground are pretty much the same place, but can low could be in a couple different places. So
yeah, I think you're right. And I've tried to get in there. I don't remember exactly what it was on, but it was at 8 speed. So probably the same setup. And I was using like a boroscope to try to get in, and I can't get my, So that day I went on eBay and I bought all the connectors that I could find for those in the 6 speeds, and makes it a heck of a lot easier.
So we'll see when that connector shows up, then we'll see if this is successful or not. Honestly, I just needed to let me program it, normally. So I guess unlock it, if you will, and then allow me to program it, code it normally, and shift out of park. It sucks because I think since it's a G chassis, no one that I know of, I don't know anybody that's doing OBD except me. And I shouldn't say except, because I don't know if like a BMW Explorer would do all OBD. But what I'm seeing is you're backpinning, can low, and you're pulling data that way. A couple of different tools, just via OBD, pulling some data. You can see a line that looks corrupt, and I don't mean a line of hex. I think it's software versions, and there's, if I remember right, there's like 5 lines. It'll have whatever number, dot, and it's not a bin, but the last line is just corrupt. There's nothing there. And that makes sense. So if I think if I can unlock it, it'll let me code it and should be happy.
I did a 2020 Z4, which is a G chassis, but I did not do that OBD. I did it like clone like you're doing from original to used. And I think I used Flex for that one to get that one done. That's pretty straightforward. So
Top Done, Autel, Launch, all of them, none of them work. None of them. And then Autel doesn't have support for G chassis, period. I suppose I could go back and just try to lie to it and see if it would pull, but it wouldn't do it OBD anyways.
What's the worst that could happen?
I say that a lot. I'm not the only one, too. Brian Pollock called me the other day, and he had a Hyundai. He's going to program J. He had some reservations, and I had a lot of reservations, too. But then while we're rattling off all the reasons he should hit the go button, it really came down to, like, what's the worst that could happen? He hit the button.
Success?
No, I think that cloud of smoke that drifted over Red Wing
Oh, that's
a few days later was from that Hyundai. As far as I know, it went well. At least didn't cause it to be disabled.
you think of all the specifically programming, but all the events that go through every day with no problem. I mean, unless you're doing something stupid, which I do occasionally, it really doesn't go bad that often. But it's always in the back of your mind with, is this one going to work? Or if it's just something someone you know has had a problem on, you're hesitant, even though most of the time it works just fine. But yeah, we have these friends and we hear the stuff and, oh, this module takes 4 hours to do. And, oh man, I don't know if I want to get into this. And most of the time it's fine.
I get worried when I'm confident. That's when I start to lose confidence. Is once I start getting confident, I start to really worry.
The key is to never, ever, ever say, and again, I do this because I'm stupid, but say this will be a quick, easy one, and then I'll get to the whatever else I'm doing. No, 100% of the time, it is the rest of my day is spent on that vehicle that was supposed to be quick and easy.
This is a few months ago, but those are my exact words. Subaru eyesight calibration. Dude, I don't know how many I had done before that. 20, 30. I don't think it was 50, but 20, 30 of them. No problems. None. Just boom. 90 some percent. And yeah, they're wondering, Friday, early afternoon, like, hey, could you whip this out? Yeah, no problem. Be right over. Killed me. And I even went online. I hate asking for help. I hate it. But it's like, I got to get this thing done. Maybe somebody will point out the stupid thing I'm doing. And yeah, okay, I'll get better, but I'll have to eat some crow. And I'm more than willing to do that to A, get the car done, and B, to become better at what I do. Couldn't get there. It goes to the dealer. They couldn't get it to go. So they ordered a eyesight camera that was on like perma back order. And I'm still not sure it got it yet.
Okay. I was curious. I think we had chatted. I had a 19 Crosstrek earlier this summer. Very similar scenario. It's actually my first Subaru, though, that I had done and never got fixed. Same thing. Went to the dealer. They told him, yeah, it needs a camera, like a new camera, because we had tried a couple different used ones. They put the new one in. Wouldn't work. They just kind of like gave up on it. They were like, yeah, we can't do anything for you because it had OE glass, new camera. They went through the same stuff that I did, I'm assuming. But this car is still at the used car lot that I frequent and do a lot of work for them. And they just happened to get another 19 Crosstrek on the lot, like same year and everything. And so he's like, well, hey, if you're interested, we kept this one as kind of like a loaner parts runner. So you got all these warning lights on the dash. Can't sell it that way. Not at the price they want to. So they're like, hey, if you want, we'll set these things right next to each other and you can do, a comparison between the two. We're thinking like mounting up a laser to the camera itself and see where it intersects on the target, just to see, is there something else that's missing now. All I have to do is find a few hours time to do that, but I would actually be pretty interested in getting that one resolved because it never did. Contrast error, contrast error, contrast error. That's all I ever got with that thing. But yeah, that was my first experience with Subaru. So then I was a little gun shy, and the next one just went through fine, 92%, super easy. I'm like, oh, okay. And the thing is the next one I did, I had the measurements like memorized. I had set up the other one so many different times because we tried every different position and facing away from the light and this and that. And I had set that stupid target board up so many times. I knew the measurements.
The dealer that I talked to, they have the target just on a wall, like permanent.
They just drive up to it, huh?
They just drive up to it. And I don't even know that they measure it, to be quite honest. I think they just kind of eyeball it, run it, goes. That did not happen on the one that I tried desperately to try to calibrate. Maybe it got a camera in it and didn't work, and they're just saying it needed another camera, or the customer is just saying must not be done yet, or I don't know. But that's been some time. Like, so I'm kind of curious if they ever got it, or can I have it back and try it?
Yeah, I hate those ones you don't ever hear one way or the other. And most of the time, I assume that's good. Like, oh, the car's fixed, but not always. Sometimes you talk to somebody eventually and they're like, yeah, they just parked it, or no, they sold it, or, you know. But so I always wonder, I like to get a conclusion as much as I can, but it's tough with the mobile gig sometimes.
Yeah, I heard that's even difficult for class developers and presenters, teachers, instructors that are primarily mobile diagnosticians, to do a case study sometimes to get the known good verifications next to impossible.
Some sort of picture of here's what it looks like when it's fixed, or here's what it's doing when it's supposed to. Everything's working the way it's supposed to. So yeah, for sure. I have lots of known bad captures in my scope captures. That's for sure.
I have a bunch that I just assume are bad.
If you need a bad cam crank waveform for something, I got a pretty good library.
I gotta start another Facebook page.
Yeah. Who's the guy who's got them all? Ray something or another?
Oh man, yeah, like Ray Yeager or something like that.
Yeah. Eat your heart out, Ray. I've got all the bad waveforms.
He's got all the good ones. You got all the bad ones. It's like yin and yang.
Speaking of classes, I shot this idea over to you a little while ago after Vision. You know, obviously we're in a bunch of different classes and seeing some really great content there as always. And I thought it'd be a kind of a interesting conversation to talk about what makes a really good class, and you know, maybe dive into some of the more subtle stuff that is less obvious. And maybe it's known, maybe it's not, but that not everybody thinks about when they're in a class or signing up for a class, or, you know, picking what instructor am I going to, you know, pay to see, or pay for their material, or drive or fly to go see them. What kind of things like really make a good presentation and a good class?
That's a good question. I think the safe answer is any class presented by Thornton. So done. You're welcome. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Have a good night. Agreed. Well, that's the thing though, is like there's certain guys or gals where, you know, like it's going to be a good class. Doesn't necessarily even matter that much about the content or the subject matter. You know, they're going to put on a good class, and their insights to whatever that thing is you're going to learn something. Like, I'm sure we'd both go to a basic electrical class put on by John for sure. Like, you're going to learn something from that for sure.
You're either going to learn something or just feel like you got some reinforcement or encouragement that you're on the right track. You know what I mean? Like he does a class. He takes a lot of the ideas George Menchu came up with the colors or markers for wiring schematics, and drawing out power and switched power and ground and signal, you know, that type. Okay, yeah, that class, I don't know if I really took anything specifically away, like, oh, that's new. But there's a lot of reinforcement of, all right, I'm on track. there's a lot of validity to printing this out 2 or 3 different copies and drawing the lines out the way everything is in different like switch states or something of that matter. There's some credence to that. Like, I don't think I would normally ever do that. And then having done that and seen that, been like, yeah, you know what? I think there's some situations where I might do this, especially like some convoluted power window type circuits that just like they all got to run through the master switch. And so you got wires going back and forth. There might be some value to whipping out the color crayons and tracing that guy out a little bit to help work it out in
Chevy
your brain.
Cruise radiator relay fan.
Yeah. It seems like there's some older Nissans too that just had like 2 or 3 fan switches that were just a little bit of a mind job studying that stupid schematic. What makes for a good class? Part of me wants to start out with almost critiquing what I see other people deeming a good class to work our way to it. And I don't know if that's just my need to just run people down. I think one is the ones that they come out saying it was a great class. They can't really say what they learned, but they laughed the whole time. Like it was entertaining. Whoever the instructor was just super funny, almost like a stand-up comic. And they laughed and laughed. And the 3 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours just flew by. But when it came down to brass tacks, there wasn't a whole lot they could tell you that they could take back to the shop and apply. So I suppose that part of the answer was in there. Is there information given that can be taken back and applied? That goes both ways. Like one, there wasn't any because they're doing a comedy routine and playing to the crowd. And there's a lot of really good instructors or presenters that, you know, if that first joke or 2 hits, that they kind of abandon the class and go to the comic routine. I don't know if there's an endorphin rush they're getting. I suppose the classes that are just over everyone's heads or so in depth with theory, just you can't take it back and apply it. You know, yeah, sometimes it's cool to know how certain things work, you know, how this sensor really works or how this algorithm really works. But to go back and fix a car with it, and we've talked about it in the past on podcasts, on the phone, essentially recorded it last week about electricity. Like, you know, how accurate do you really want it? Because if we go really accurate, we're not talking about using meters and scopes and test lights. We're talking about, you know, fundamental physics, particle physics.
Yeah, and you're not fixing too many cars with that information alone.
Not really. I'm sure there's some phenomena, maybe. Not the vast majority of cars you're ever going to encounter.
Yeah, I haven't figured out that entanglement thing, but I'll let you know next time I'm testing a wire up here and you let me know if something funky happens on a wire in your car down there.
Yeah, you know, that'd be about it, right? I'm sure whatever ones we got entangled that we're messing with are light years away.
Some dude on another planet just trying to fix this taillight, and he's like, what is going on here?
Freaking kidding me?
But yeah, a class that just like, and I've been in them, where it kind of like blows your mind. You're like, wow, that dude that's putting on the class, so smart. He's spent so much time in depth on this stuff, and he, you know, went through it in this class. That's not always the best thing. I think we've talked about it too before. It's like, if you're just like so blown away by the amount or the depth of the knowledge, how much does that actually help you going back to your job, doing what you're doing?
Yeah, some of that's like class title, class description, being accurate, but then also as the attendee, sometimes you have to take some responsibility for that. Because let's say you go into like a Pico class, Pico Scope 7, Part 2, or Advanced. Well, now everybody wants to get in that class. However, you can't just get a waveform on the screen. Like with a Pico Scope sitting in front of you, you would struggle to get the pattern on the screen, set it up properly, zoom in, save it, open it, leave notes, whatever. But you went to the advanced class where, you know, they got math channels and masks and output to CSVs and, triggering that automatic saves or beeps off of a mask, something like that, and many other functions, advanced triggers. And you leave going like, oh man, that scope can do an awful lot. Man, I got to start using it. Well, you got to take a little bit of responsibility for that, going like that. Oh, I shouldn't have been in that class. Or when I'm signing up, going, maybe I should be looking for the intro. Let's do intro to Pico first, and then I'll take that back to the shop and I can use it for a while and be able to just get some patterns on the screens and manipulate them and email them to friends and whatnot. And then next year or a few months from now, hit a different conference and go, I'm ready for advanced Pico.
Yeah, I'm sure it's tough for the people making classes and titles and stuff because you got to put a lot of thought into what are people going to shy away from or what are they going to gravitate towards. And so, obviously they want people to go to their classes. And so the advanced or whatever terminology ends up being used, you do see that a lot on stuff. You want to be able to come away with something that is really practical, that you can use. At least that's aspiration I have for going to a class where I'm taking time, spending money. Is it something that I can take home with me and actually apply? And I think that's a big thing in making a good class is like keeping in mind whatever the class is centered around, whatever it happens to be. How can I make this, or at least the large majority of it, practical for the people attending? And how can they take something away from this and actually apply it? And, going into theory is great for a portion of the time or to support something you're saying. But yeah, there's a limit to what's necessary. I think like really, really advanced, maybe like some fringe testing methods or tooling or stuff like that too. It's definitely interesting, but then a lot of the time you wonder, okay, well, how practical is it actually in everyday shop life or whatever, it is that I'm doing? Like, am I going to be able to use that technique successfully be productive with it, really fix a lot of cars with it? Or is it just something that's kind of maybe fun to play with? Or, it could be something that takes a lot of work to master. That's another thing, that maybe it's something that I can't just go to this one class, watch this guy do it, and then go apply it. I'm going to have to try this out on 50 cars before I really find a way to utilize it. And maybe it doesn't come to fruition that way, right? Like maybe, this isn't as useful in this application as I thought it or hoped it was going to be. So yeah, I guess to sum that up, it's just when I'm building a class, I'm trying to keep in mind what's practical for the people attending.
We're going to have to change the name of the podcast to the John Thornton Fan Club, but anybody that's been able to see him once or hundreds of times, we're spoiled. I always want to kind of honor the guy and show some reverence and appreciation, a lot of appreciation for him and being able to go to his classes and what he's done. But that's asking a lot of most instructors. So his background is, not going way, way back. I don't mean like his educational background. He worked in a shop, owned a shop, did the diagnostics in that shop, and then went to mobile. So he's doing that day in and day out, but then he's spent a lot of time learning about education. He's got a method to his madness of how he's presenting these classes, and has spent a lot of time with kind of this circular educational strategy. A lot of favorite presenters are people that do this for a living, day in and day out. That's what they do. They fix cars every day. But they don't have the time to invest to come up with this strategy of education with education in mind. It's really, here's the case study. This is what car, this is how it was broke, or this is what the complaints were, and this is how I went about fixing the vehicle. And for a lot of us, that's what we want. I want somebody else's perspective. I want to see how you went about it. Oh, this cool tool, a different way of thinking about something. But it's not like circular. It doesn't come back at the end and reinforce the final case study or something like that. It's a high bar to be aware of what's going on, and that all of us observing him who are becoming more and more regular presenters. And I would not, when I say we, I guess I don't want to put myself in that. I'm not trying to put myself in that conversation. So we was probably a bad choice of words, but anybody that is becoming more involved in instructing and class development, in the back of their mind, that's probably something that should be working on them, is how can I build up a little bit of the theory where it matters, and maybe goes overboard a little bit. I mean, theory is fun too, right? But then it leads to, that's how it contributed to the strategy I used to diagnose this vehicle or analyze this vehicle. And it just kind of becomes a little bit of a recurring theme throughout the class, however long that is, 3 hours, 8 hours. Most of us don't have that. Most of us, if you're doing that, don't have that thought process when we're doing it. Not trying to be a hero and look like I know what I'm doing, but this is how the car was broke. This is what the complaints were, and this is how I went about figuring it out. Maybe you can learn something from that, and maybe one of you will raise your hand and say, like, I do that with a thermal imager. Oh, that's a really good idea. Let me hear more about that. To me, we're talking like pie in the sky. Really, what makes a great class great is an educational strategy that's a little bit more than just, this is how I went about doing this. Even though I find great value in somebody else, this is how they went about doing this. And I can take bits and pieces of it. I can say, oh, that's an interesting perspective. That's how they looked at that. That's how they approach this problem. Maybe I can shoot holes in it. Not that I would do that to feel better about myself, but that's also a certain learning to that too, where if somebody presents something to you that has holes in that strategy, being able to find the holes in a strategy in it itself is a lesson, right?
Yeah. It means you're following along and thinking about what you would do in that situation.
And if you go back to reproduce it and find out those holes that you thought were there really aren't there, that's powerful.
Yeah, they have whole professions on like people who teach other people how to teach. That's a job that you can have, is teaching teachers. And I did a little bit of that in the college. I got to see a little bit of that side of the world. That is its own whole world of these theories behind education and strategies, like you mentioned, and ways to develop a course structure. And just picking the objectives for a class can actually take a lot of thought and effort. Like, that actually is much more difficult than you might think for just making a class. Is, what are the objectives of the class? Do I want you as a participant to learn in this class or potentially be able to do after this class? Then with that, building everything that goes into the class is to work towards those objectives, right? So it's just not having a case study to have a case study. The case study has a point, or it has a testing method or a theory or something about the car that I really want you to know about. I'm using the case study to help you get there. And that's all tied into the objectives. And by no means do I have this mastered or stuff that, I played around with it in the college and the few classes that I've done. But I think that's what you're speaking to with, John's stuff, is like, you got the whole thing planned out, right? And he knows where he's going, and there's a reason why he's telling you about the car that's broken. It's not just, hey, this is a really interesting car, did this weird thing, here's how I figured it out. Like, there's a testing method or strategy or tool or a vehicle platform that you're going to be able to handle better when you're out of there if you've taken that stuff from the class. So someone who hasn't developed a class definitely probably isn't aware of like all of the effort that goes into that. I think you mentioned one of your previous episodes, and you were talking about John, but just all the effort that goes into making a class and how much crazy work that is to get something really good together. And there's probably not a whole lot of people out there willing to do that on a regular basis and work a full-time job on top of it too, you know?
Yeah, it was my vision recap because just a recurring theme because John and Scott Manna they presented a class each. So a drastic reduction compared to what we've been spoiled with over the years. So, you know, everybody's wondering what they're doing. Are they retiring or whatnot? And a lot of discussion about who's next. And I just found it unreasonable. It's like, I think there's plenty of people that are absolutely smart enough and capable enough, but that time, the time just to remain focused from an individual standpoint, and then that his family allowed him to do that. And what a gift to us. How many other people are going to have that? You know, you're either going to be single and this is your life. Okay. So that's possible. It doesn't usually last, right? People don't typically stay single, you know, typically. And then now you have other responsibilities, other interests. Like, you know, I go to my office or whatever area I have set up for the cave and work on this class, work on this case study up on this system and see if I can put together a class on whatever. Or I could go hang out with the girlfriend or the wife, the kids. And who blames them for wanting to go hang out with the girlfriend, the wife, the kids? If you have a wife and the kids and a girlfriend, you're pretty busy.
Yeah, you got no time for writing classes then. So that brings up another good point, and you touched on it earlier, and it definitely shouldn't be all of the class, but I think injecting some humor and some interaction with the attendees, it does make, you know, it's just like that cherry on top of a really good class if the instructor has that lively personality and knows how to interact with a crowd of people, right? That can be very intimidating. I mean, it is for most people standing up in front, and you might kind of lose your bearings, but some people are just really good at it and they have a good sense of humor. And I definitely enjoy a class where the person leading has that. It makes it a lot of fun. And we were talking about Justin Morgan is fantastic with that. His delivery. I mean, obviously he's super, super smart guy. I learn something every time I go to his class, but he's also got a really good interaction with everybody in there, and the way he delivers the class is excellent. You're guaranteed to get some laughs out of it.
The Morganisms, he was a good one. I always thought Dave Scaler.
I don't think I ever took a class from him.
Yeah, I know I bring him up a bunch, and he's not super active presenter, but he was always really good at that. You know, kind of the New Jersey, not only the accent, but kind of the attitude and all that. And the phrasing is, for me, keeps me in stitches. Definitely keeps my attention. And then, yeah, kind of bantering back and forth. Classes are a little more interactive. Like as a presenter, the worst thing is just having to drone on and on, listening to yourself and not being able to get a response from anybody. That is brutal.
Yeah, that's a skill in itself, is figuring out how to engage and then actually having the presence of mind to do it. And sometimes it's patience too. It depends on the audience that you have, obviously, and the size of the audience, but sometimes it's about just taking that pause when it's needed and kind of waiting people out. I've had to do that, and maybe that's more common with younger students at the college level, but sometimes you just had to play chicken of like, you know, I'm waiting. I've posed a question and it's just crickets. And so you're supposed to count to 8. That was what a tip that I was given when I first started
Must have taken it from bull riding.
But do it in your head, and it doesn't seem like that long, but it's an eternity when you're standing in front of a group of people. But it works most of the time. Like somebody will eventually, chime in with something. Again, it depends on the group that you're with. The opposite can be true as well of like trying to rein it in. And so I've been attendee in classes where that can be an issue. Like people in the crowd are just constantly throwing things or trying to derail the class. And that's a skill set for the people up front too, that have the ability to interact with people. Obviously they came to your class, you want to do that, but also rein it in and keep everything on track. Because depending on the group of people in the class and whatever, boy, stuff can get derailed pretty quickly, and it's tough to stay on topic of what the class is actually about.
Yeah, I was going to see if I could think of others that were just pretty good about bantering. Vince Manship was really good. Just had a good rapport. I haven't seen him in a while. See how he's doing. Honestly, Ryan Koyman, when he was presenting, I don't know how much he does anymore, but when he was doing more presenting, was really good at it. Also, that tech background, so been there, done that, kind of spoke the language, if you will. I mean, it's easy to say like just the topic, the subject matter resonates. So if you're going in like eager to learn, we kind of have these rages, it's all the rage. And so people go in just hungry now because this is the rage. Pressure transducers for how long? It's just, man, that's the rage. If the subject matter was there and decent and you're presenting, you're probably going to be popular. When you're trying to put together like a great class, you've got the content that's applicable, accurate enough to be applicable. And then the presentation style is you're not just there to entertain, but you got to try to strike that balance where you're keeping people engaged along with being able to communicate on, I don't know if levels is the right word, multiple levels. I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe being able to say stuff a couple of different ways where it resonates with different people in a way they need it to.
Yeah. Well, answering questions, like you don't know what kind of questions you're going to get and what level the questions are going to be. The events that we go to, you're probably going to have somebody in there smarter than you sitting in the audience asking you questions. And so you want to try to prepared of, okay, how am I going to, handle this?
In my case, it's most of the people sitting in there way smarter than I am.
And then be able to, answer all different levels of question. And that's sort of thinking on your feet too, and being really prepared with your material. That is a tough one.
For 98 years, the NAPA name has meant quality parts and service. It also reflects top quality training programs to help you build a more successful vehicle repair business. No doubt, the technician shortage is impacting everyone, but you're not facing this battle alone. NAPA has the solution by making NAPA Auto Tech training available near you. NAPA Auto Tech provides automotive aftermarket technicians career development opportunities through structured, disciplined, measured, and high-quality technical instruction, no matter the technician or service advisor's skill level. This instruction enhances understanding of vehicle systems, increases first-time repair capability, and overall customer satisfaction. It also prepares technicians to become ASE certified. It's a fact technicians who receive training to improve their knowledge and skills have a higher sense of job satisfaction. This reduces technician turnover and increases productivity, directly improving a shop's profitability. It is vital to the success of a shop's business that today's technicians are equipped to diagnose and repair today's complex vehicles. With our ever-changing technology, the technician's knowledge and skills need to be updated and refreshed on a regular basis. As you labor over the decision of whether to send your techs to get their skills sharpened, keep in mind, NAPA Auto Tech training is an investment, not an expense, and it's available to all. Much of NAPA Auto Tech's training is offered in more than one format to accommodate varieties of learning styles and training preferences so each person can maximize their learning. Whether you're more of a hands-on person or enjoy learning at your own pace, NAPA Auto Tech is here to provide you with the training you need in the format that works best for you. To learn more about what NAPA Auto Tech offers, contact napaautotech.com. if you're carrying the class, it's your class, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever, 8 hours. You better kind of know the material. Not kind of. You better know the material. Not just the material. You better know the subject. If you're doing an electrical class, you better have a pretty darn good grasp of electricity, because if you're getting stumped by a question that fits within the description of the class, that's a big warning that you're teaching it before you should have. And unfortunately, I'm sure there's plenty of cases where you find out the hard way you were not ready. Like you did think you had it all covered. And now here you are, in the second hour of this 3-hour class, and somebody has just asked you a question that's totally destroyed. And then, of course, I get it. There's techniques of, can we talk about this at break? Can you come talk to me after class? I don't know off the cuff. Give me your email or cell number and I'll text you or email you or whatever. I will find this out for you. And not that that's a bad answer, especially if the question doesn't fit the context of the class. If you're doing basic electricity and now you've got somebody asking you something high level, microamps probe, that doesn't fit. Okay, we're not talking about that. I can't answer that right now or won't because of I want to stay on track here. Give me your contact info or come see me after class. We'll exchange contact info and I will get back to you. That's 100% reasonable. But if this is something that's fitting within the description of the class, the scope of the class, that's a problem that you should know the subject matter pretty well.
Avoiding derailment versus knowing the subject matter and being able to answer the questions. I think another thing that I've always appreciated by somebody presenting is that they're honest, right? And so, hey, it's going to happen. Like there's going to be a question thrown up there. I'm not sure on that. And maybe it does pertain to the class. And I've definitely seen people do that where, hey, I'm going to find that out and get back to you, or here's contact info or whatever. But that they're honest about the fact that I don't have the answer to that question for, whatever reason right now, rather than just BSing their way through it, right? I've seen that too.
Well, that's my entire class, though, is me BSing through it. They want handouts from me. It's like, how do you write handouts for something you're just going to improvise when you get there? Like,
with that honesty thing too, another thing that I appreciate in a class is when the person is honest about, usually case studies, I guess it'd be where this comes into play, because they're referencing, work that they did on a vehicle, something that they did out in the field, right? It's not talking about theory, but actually working on a car, trying to figure out something. And the honesty, or lack thereof, I think definitely shapes a class. You can't always tell, but sometimes you can tell. And it's like, did you really jump to that conclusion without anything else in the middle? Obviously, people that are in the class that are also doing the same things, yeah, you can tell a lot of the time. You're like, that something doesn't add up there.
You can't get there from here.
Yeah. But to see maybe the stumbling blocks that somebody hit on the way to figuring out whatever it is and throw that in there. Obviously, you want to present something that's useful to people, and screwing up cars sometimes can be, maybe not always. You want to have, here's how I actually fixed it. But I think it's valuable to include that of like, here are all the steps and here's where I went wrong. Here's where I made a mistake. Because that itself can be the lesson, right? Like, don't make this mistake. This was actually easy to figure out. You didn't need me to tell you about the fix. It was relatively easy, but here's how I screwed this one up. You don't want to do the same thing. So I like seeing that in a class, and some do it better than others for sure.
Yeah. And going with that, the honesty too is one of my pet peeves, is where I'm pretty sure the information that they are presenting was not collected. They didn't diagnose the car using the process that they're showing you in class. They backed into it, or they used I'll pick on pressure transducers because why not? They did not get this vehicle that was misfiring on whatever cylinder and threaded in their pressure transducer, either in cylinder or in the intake, and started it and snap throttled a few times and then analyzed the waveform and said, oh, it needs this. They actually diagnosed it in more conventional means, mechanical compression test, and cylinder leakage test and vacuum gauge. That's how they actually diagnosed it, in a borescope. Then they went and either, had collected as they went with the pressure transducer, or after it was already diagnosed, got a bunch of captures, analyzed them, and said, oh, that's got to be why. See that notch there, or see, where this bump occurred? That's this happening. Never mind, it's probably not reproducible. Never mind, that's not how you actually diagnose the car. If you're developing this idea, that's how you would do that, right? You would start collecting this stuff, and then over time, you'd build up quite the database to where you don't need to use the conventional means anymore. You can just strictly use the transducer. But then you would think, inevitably, on certain cars, or engines, I should say, certain engines, it doesn't work. The first thing that comes to mind is like leaning towers, compression towers. For some vehicles, that is absolutely a dead giveaway that there is a upper cylinder leak. On other cars, that's normal. They all look like that. Well, now that makes that test dangerous, because if this is a car you've never seen and you don't have a database, how do you look at that with leaning towers and go, I should turn left or should I turn right? It's not to bash on pressure transducers. Everything's got its place, but it's a kind of a pet peeve of mine where that honesty of how you got there isn't exactly true. Or at least not calling a spade, that I know on these engines, I've seen enough of these engines that I know a leaning tower is bad. And then maybe even try to dive into a little bit further if you can. It might be rough collecting that level of data, but these are the engines that typically have leaning towers, and I'm thinking this is why. I've heard some very, very good trainers they have some ideas and they're like, don't write this down. I have an idea I'm working on, and I'm working on this as I go, but I have a suspicion that this phenomenon is created by this. This is something I've kind of started noticing and paying attention to. And I don't have nearly enough data to say to you, you can rely on this, but this is the road I'm going down. I'm going to explore this. That would be really cool. I've only heard a few top-notch instructors say stuff like that, where they're just kind of pulling the curtain back a little bit, going, I have a gut feeling, or the data that I have been seeing and the reference material that I've been reading and using is kind of pointing me in this direction, but I don't have enough to really write it down in a class and say, you can kind of bank on this.
Yeah, just like experimental, which a lot of the stuff we do kind of falls into that category, right? Like, I think this might be useful, to test this way or to look at it this way, but you got to try it.
It's classic scientific method, right? Kind of have a hypothesis. You have an idea. You got to test it. You can't just test it once. It's got to be tested and tested. And the whole idea behind science is to break the idea.
Yeah, to prove yourself wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's every scientist, professional or otherwise, amateur. What you're trying to do is legitimately break it. You're going to try it the exact same way they did it. Does it work? Yes or no? If it doesn't, try to support why it didn't. If it does, try to support why it does. That's classic. That's the classic scientific method.
That would be a really good class to try to wrap that idea into the everyday technician's life, or, diagnostic strategies of hey, you should really be trying to prove yourself wrong, to a point. Don't waste your whole day away and not make any money, but as much as it's reasonable to have that, mindset when you're doing your testing and your diagnosis of, hey, can I prove myself wrong here? I think it's this. Can I prove myself wrong? I think I see this in this test method. Can I prove myself wrong? And honestly, give it a try and see if you can. You could develop a decent course on that. That's an interesting topic.
I know that Eric Ziegler has stated such things in his classes. I don't know that he's created an entire class that is essentially a diagnostic process based off of a scientific method. But I do know that he references scientific method about, I have this idea, let's set up an experiment. Those are absolutely words he's used, but I can't say whether he has or hasn't put together a class with that mentality or angle of let's learn about the scientific method a little bit. And then how can we apply this to our world? And then boom, 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 case study. I mean, that's what you do, right? Whatever the problem is, you have an idea, or you go to, I know a lot of people after verify the complaint, and then they go to service information looking for any kind of bulletins, or depending on the car lines, like special service message type stuff. I know some people go to databases, very mixed feelings about that, but you're looking for stuff to give you ideas of what could be wrong before you have to come up with your own. And eventually you're going to have an idea of what you think is wrong. And now you have to test it. You have to set up your experiment to see if you can give yourself an idea that you're right, or disprove it and have to move on to the next thing. If Eric hasn't done it, then that should be a class you write. I look forward to it. Vision 2025.
Oh boy. What do you think about PowerPoints? Obviously, big part of just about every class. Maybe not every single one of them, but most of them.
I think that's where an education on educating or presenting would be powerful.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what makes a great PowerPoint, and I mean, me personally, I feel like it might be real simple. It's just sort of an aid. Or what makes a PowerPoint not great or frustrating or takes away from the class?
A bunch of different things. One is some people use a PowerPoint like a script. I don't know if you've ever been in a class where the instructor or presenter is reading the slide to you. It's all kinds of brutal. And I get why. You're standing up there and you turn and you look at it, and the next thing you know, you're reading off. Or if you're really nervous, but then you're talking about this as your first couple times up there, I can see how you get caught reading the slide. But as a general rule, it's a horrible idea. Horrible. Another thing is cramming too much information on one slide, where you have 9 bullet points on one slide. I think you try to keep it around 3.
I feel like it should just be kind of a cue card for the presenter of, okay, this is the next thing I'm supposed to talk about. And obviously, with what we do, some visual aids are nice. Here's a diagram. I can show you what I'm talking about. Or here's the picture of the part or whatever. But the slides should just really be your cue card to say, okay, now we're talking about voltage drop, and I'm going to go on about all the things that I want to get across about voltage drop. And when I do a PowerPoint, I try to keep them as simple as I can. A picture, a few words, and try to keep it at that. And that seems to be, from my experience, the most effective. But yeah, they get too wordy, and definitely don't just read word for word from your PowerPoint. But you're right. I think when you're nervous, that's just an easy thing. I'm going to fixate on the screen, make sure I don't miss anything. And yeah, it's tough to sit through a class like that. I mean, you don't see a lot of that at an event like Vision, but I've been in those types of classes before.
If I'm putting together a PowerPoint, part of it is to try to, like you're saying, keep me on track. Because believe it or not, I can kind of go off tangents.
What?
Yeah. I know.
I don't believe it.
Give you a minute to process that. So yeah, it kind of keeps me on track. The other thing is I think about it as from the handout perspective that a lot of our PowerPoints just get dumped into a book and that's the book. Well, all right. The idea of the PowerPoint is for reference material down the road if they have to grab that book to help, whatever that may be. You're doing a network class on CAN and now they have a broken vehicle with a CAN network issue. They're going to go get your book and they have to be able to use it to hopefully help them work through and recall your presentation, recall the class, and then also just help them work through the problem. So I try to think about it in that way.
Yeah, there's some presenters, the PowerPoint slides are very simple. And if you were not there, maybe to take some notes or to jot some stuff down along the way, the slides themselves probably wouldn't be very useful to you. And I wonder sometimes if that's by design so that, their actual class material, you'd have to be there to really get the value out of it. But if you were and you made some notes or whatever, well, now it is really valuable to you in the future. I've seen that before. And I don't know. You'd have to ask the specific person if that's what they're trying to do or not.
Some people was trying to protect intellectual property. Some people were trying to prevent people from just running into the classroom, grabbing a book and bailing. So they wouldn't put all the pertinent information in the book. You had to sit through the class and then they would tell you, fill in the blank here or there if there's a spec or whatever, the answer to what you found with the case study. Those are the two biggest reasons. And some of it even urged by whoever was putting on the conference was, they're having an issue. Not so much anymore. Now everything's digital and nobody's going to be bombing your class to get the digital copy.
I will say I got a lot of books this year. I don't know if it was just the classes I picked, but I came home with way more books than last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
World Pack?
Yeah, a couple of them were.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said about having a tangible book in your hand.
Do you have all of yours? Like you kept them over the years?
John's I have. I mean, I guess, yeah, every book except for maybe a couple that I probably burned on the way out that were so horrible.
So, I mean, you must have stacks and stacks of those things.
Dude. Yeah, those cardboard boxes that keep for like taxes and invoices or copies of repair orders and stuff. I might have like 8 of those things just stuffed with John's books and then a few others.
You keep them at the shop?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes most sense. That's when you need them.
I went and grabbed one the other day. GM Most, the Most bus. John's book is freaking awesome. Freaking awesome. GM Most works kind of odd. It's a little unintuitive. You kind of work backwards. That freaking book, man. Oh, a Jeep, a PCI network. I couldn't talk to modules. The network, the waveform looks good. Ended up kind of a weird, more of a scan tool issue than a vehicle issue. But I think I have a body control module issue. But I was trying to find out, should I be able to talk to these things on a bench? Not that John's book specifically answered that, but it kind of did in that they talk. Like they're able to send signals on the PCI themselves. That they don't need an interpreter. You know what I mean? Like some modules, you can't get them to really talk unless they're woken up by a BCM. This was not the case. So I needed to know that because it's kind of like, am I chasing my tail here? So, man, yeah, I was diving through my books trying to find his book on it. It ended up, it was in like a domestic network class 2 PCI, and is it like SCP? No, I think it's PWM for Fort. So, yeah, I was ripping through that and then got me to where I needed to go.
You're definitely not going to remember every detail from one of these classes that you go to. So having something to take away from it is like, paper documentation of some sort is nice. I have like the PDF, the downloads to reference. The couple that I actually frequent pretty often that I have on my phone is the Subaru class that I took with Shotten and Leo a few years back. I just, for whatever reason, I mean, I guess I could look up the TSB, but it's presented in a very nice way in this class. But the numbers that are good and bad and what you're shooting for the different vehicles, for the cam values. And then what was the other one that I was just looking at the other day? Oh, that was a Subaru one too, actually. That was Pedro's presentation that he did on the clearing the cam values. So actually, those were related to each other. That's why I was thinking of both of them. But have them both on my phone, pop it up, look where I need to go. Okay, cool. So the digital definitely has an advantage for sure if you can store and keep track of all that stuff.
I mean, I guess that's part of it, right? We're talking about what makes for a great class and a really good handout that's usable, that can be referenced. That's definitely a factor.
Seen a few classes with like QR codes to resources and links and material and stuff like that. And that's definitely handy as well.
Environmental wise, and I don't mean like the room temperature and humidity and lighting and all that, although lighting can be important. If it's too dark, you put people to sleep. With an instructor that is bantering and it feels like it's more of a dialogue, you feel like you're part of the class. Like you're not hesitant to raise your hand or ask a question. Because there's been classes I've been in where it's not like the instructor's on just such a roll you don't want to stop them. You feel like if you ask a question, it's a major problem. Like you're almost getting scolded, or you're really frustrating the instructor. They have their script in mind. This is how they're going to present it. It's all laid out. They're on a time limit, and now you are disturbing.
Interrupting, yeah.
Yep. And that's not a good environment to be in.
We were in a Perkins ADAS class, and the topic somehow or another came up of measuring the distance like between the car and the target in hot dogs. So, and people aren't afraid to chime in, and we figured out the distance. It was 400 or 4,000 some, I forget. But anyways, to be able to put that atmosphere out of, let's interact. Let's feel free to ask questions. Obviously, that's easy enough to say, but there is something about how you're presenting and how you're engaging that makes that free to happen, or not so much. Even if it is something that you're really interested in and that you want to learn about, if you go to an 8-hour vision class, you're going to lose your focus at some point or another. And you got your, little buddy, the cell phone in front of you the whole time. It is very simple even for someone who's into it to get off into something else. I got to hand it to anybody who's going to run an 8-hour class and keep everybody engaged that entire time. That's a skill set. It's
no problem, because I just beat everybody to the punch. I start scrolling Facebook before they do. So they just watch me up there. Depending on the content or subject, some classes lend themselves much better to hands-on than just purely minds-on, especially like how-tos. It's really rough, where I think a lot of people in this profession are very like hands-on type of people. They learn by doing, or learn better by doing. Therefore, if you're doing a class that really ends up being pretty theoretical, even if it's not like quantum field theory and with electronics and electricity, but it's in theory, this is how you would do this. Here's a photo of doing this. Here's, using a meter, using a scope, setting up the scope. If they could be doing it, that sticks a lot better. I think there's a lot of classes that get done minds on, be much better served to be hands-on. The problem with hands-on is logistics.
Yeah, that's a whole nother animal to manage that.
Attendee to presenter ratio becomes a problem. You know, the hands-on Pico class, okay, that Shotton and I do, that Harvey, Chan, and I did prior. Yes, it sells out. It's usually sold out before registration opens. It's also capped. Like, I think it's capped at, I don't think there's more than 40 people in there. I think it's 40. Maybe it's higher, but I think it's 40.
You do small groups then?
Usually 6 vehicles or more. So I think this year, some people pulled in their vehicle or their rental vehicle. But you start out with a big group for kind of a presentation, right? There's just kind of maybe an hour and a half, hour, 2 hours. Try to keep it under 2 hours. It's supposed to be a hands-on class. We want you to be hands-on. So presentation, I'm going to talk about the buttons and then get you on vehicles. And the idea, right, is what buttons do I push? How do I hook up to get this signal? Like, where am I going to hook up? And then, quote unquote, analyzing the signal. So hands-on lends itself extremely well because it's all fine and dandy if you kind of know what buttons to push. It's kind of all fine and dandy if you kind of know how to analyze the waveform. But when you got to go figure out how to hook it up, where to hook up at, all that, that's another level. Not that you can't. I mean, we've done it for years to just do it in a classroom setting, but there's just something to be said about hands-on. It's just, you get more than 5 people, 6 people on a car, it's a zoo. And then you kind of get personalities where you kind of get the more alphas. They're driving the scope and they're, you know, get out of my way. I'll hook it up. You know, they want to just bang, 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 get through the workup, the packet. You know, if they have a packet to work through or if they don't, they're running the show. And then you got the more modest people, the meek, kind of sitting back and watching and and do they get as much out of it as they could have? So yeah, it's got some caveats. It makes it hard at conferences to do a lot of it where you can have the venue and the cars. Cause I think a lot of us could come up with some really, really good ideas for some really, really, really good classes. If you're putting on the event and you're charging kind of a flat fee, just can't make it up in the numbers, right? I don't know how much money Vision really makes on a Pico class. It's got 40 people. Well, there's a lot of classes and classrooms where they got way more than 40 people and they don't have to bus people over and ship them food for lunch. And, you know, I don't know if they're renting the space or making donations to get the space. You know, if depending on the situation, is a car being rented or cars being rented? Sounds like a big time loss leader.
In a perfect world, I mean, that's how it would be, is you'd have a little bit of theory and then go in right into the hands-on. And I mean, there's been smaller classes over the years that'll do that. I'm thinking like Christofferson's EPROM class is a lot like that. A little bit of theory and then let's dive in and break some stuff, all hands-on. And that's what we did in the college too. I mean, that was our structure, is we would go do class for a few hours in the morning. Here's the content. Here's the stuff you need to know. Here's how to be safe with this. Okay, let's go do it. And then not just letting, and this might be like what would make a hands-on class good or not so good, is not just letting everybody just have a free for all and manage it themselves. And here's the cars, here's a packet, have fun, but really structuring that too and what they're doing to have those objectives too. And one of my favorite ones that we did, and this is actually pretty cool in the professional world to do at some point. It might get a little wild, but we'd have 2 groups of students, 2 cars, and we're on a particular topic, right? CAN bus. Doesn't really matter the topic, but we're trying to learn about a subject in a car. And so they start out on their own cars, and group one, both groups say, okay, you're going to introduce a fault to the system that is A, somewhat realistic, like this could happen, and B, it produces the symptoms that you think it will, right? When you break it, this is what you should expect to happen, and that should actually happen. Okay, so then they have to figure that out, which it doesn't always end up being the easiest thing in the world. And then once both groups are done, they swap and they try to figure out what's wrong with the car that they now have in front of them. And it worked well on like a competitive basis, but boy, it was really good for conceptual on the subjects that we were doing too, because they not only had to figure out how to break it, which meant how it works, but then they had to figure out one where they didn't know what was wrong, and they're trying to do it against their friends and stuff. So it made it really good. And so like something like that in the professional world would be pretty cool, a pretty cool class to have. I'm maybe something like that already exists. I don't know.
I can't think of any, but I just know that over the years, a lot of good ideas for classes, but
it's like, how are you actually going to do that? Yeah.
They would have to be more independent probably than training conferences. It would be rough to get them done in a conference setting unless you just have certain classes that are more money. So if you really want to go to a hands-on, I don't know, scan tool class, hands-on fuel trim class where there's 8 cars and they're bugged and you have to work through the process. I think a lot of people would love to do that, but are they willing to drop, for an all-day type class like that where it won't be 1 instructor or 2 instructors, it'll probably be 4 that you as an attendee, are you willing for that one class to drop $500, $700, $300? Where I think a lot of those packages, you go to the whole weekend for maybe $500 or less. And I get it. The vendors at the trade shows, like, they're the ones paying that bill, which is why I'm pretty passionate about if you go to these conferences, you owe it to the vendors to kind of peruse, stop by the booth, thank them for being there. I think that's really, we owe them that and support the ones that are there. Other than that, I don't know. Like, a lot of them, the conferences, they don't want to do that. They don't want to have like the green classes are this much money and the red classes are this money and the purple classes are this much money. But it might end up having to be something like that to get more of this. And then wherever you're going to have this conference is going to have access to venues to be able to do it. So, is there a large shop nearby that they would be willing to shut down and rent their space out? They probably don't want to on a Thursday. Maybe they might do it on a Friday. Saturday, they'd probably be down. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's kind of one-off things where, like Christofferson, I think a good example is, this is how much I need to come and go do this class. And then whoever is interested in hosting it needs to figure out how to come up with a place to do it. Pay him his money. That was the worst Malkovich impression of ever. Pay this man his money. Yeah, to put a class like that.
And a class like that proved that it can, like, there is enough interest, as long as the topic is relevant and useful, that, hey, people will pay more than you might think they would and come long distances.
With that in mind, they're paying way more for the class that you hosted. There's people from Canada that flew down and then they're staying in a hotel for a few nights, rented a car, however much the class was, $1,200 or whatever it was. Then they had their flights on top of that and their hotel on top of that and a rental car on top of that and a few meals on top of that. Like, that was not an inexpensive class for them to go to. And they did it. I think if the class is there and does what it proposes to do, I guess I don't know that certain people would pay in a heartbeat. Could I spend 8 hours with Sean Tipping and his cohorts in whatever class he wants to do that's hands-on and has 10 vehicles
and all of this was to announce me and Matt's in-person class that we'll be having in
headlamp testing.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good thing to think about. Be cool to have something like that. Just got to figure out exactly what, where, how, who.
Finally going to get that floor maintenance class put through.
The what?
Floor maintenance class.
Oh.
I keep threatening it. That or one way just sit and watch movies.
Oh, that'd be a good one, actually.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
How much is that class? It's like $1,200.
I sat through classes like that in high school, and I didn't complain.
You did too? Was it history class by chance? Because that's the one.
Yeah, I'm sure one of them was some English class or something. And I'm trying to remember. There was actually a few of them was pretty good movies. You were always down for that class. Like I'm all in. Sit down and watch a movie.
Man, history class. We had Civil War. Watch Glory and Blue and the Gray. We never really talked about Vietnam. That always got kind of skirted over. World War II, that was pre Saving Private Ryan, so nothing like that.
I want to say we watched Shawshank Redemption in some class, which is a great movie.
It is a great movie. I'm just wondering
I don't know what class it was.
I mean, do you really need a reason for Shawshank?
No.
Did you know that's a Stephen King novel? Or short?
I think I had heard that sometime before, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you that.
Yeah, it's Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. And I think the book is 4 seasons. It's a collection. One of the other books in there is Stand By Me, which is called The Body.
Okay.
Not Jesse Ventura. And the books and the movies are freaking great.
Oh, yeah. The movies are excellent.
And on that note, yeah, that was a really good topic, man. I don't know if we worked it all out, but I do think there's definitely similarities across the board of what constitutes a pretty darn good class. If you're looking to build a class, I think there's stuff there to follow that will lend itself well. And then almost like a plea to figure out how to do more hands-on type classes or allow these ideas to take. You know, because I think there's a lot of really good ones. It's just the funding gets messy. I mean, hopefully people email you or me or message us. Would you be willing to pay extra for certain classes?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question to pose for sure.
Pick the conference, and there's the whatever weekend pass you could normally buy. But if you want to take one of these special classes, there's extra. That's the way it's got to be. Otherwise, it's relying heavily on the vendors and the other classes to help pay for these smaller classes. And I don't know philosophically how much I buy into that.
Well, yeah, I'd be really curious to see what people think on that.
Well, thank you very much for joining me, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Open door policy here at Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z for Sean Tipping.
I love it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, NAPA Auto Tech Training, for sponsoring. Let me know what you think about this. Let Sean and I know if you'd be willing to pay a little extra or a lot extra for some of these courses that are forced to have smaller numbers and like extra props to make work. Yeah, if you could let us know so that maybe we could get it to the right people to see if we could affect a certain change or evolution, it'd be freaking great. Sean will take all the credit for it. That's all right. He's just that way. Thank you to the Aftermarket Radio Network for letting me do this. And you can reach out to me via social media. You can also email me at mattfanslowpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can just email Sean everything, and he can just give me like the Cliff's Notes version.
We'll give you a summary. If you want to email me, it's stmobilediag, DIAG, @gmail.com. That'd be the best one.
You heard it here. Let's overwhelm them. I'm just going to start emailing them random things.
Oh, great.
I'm going to forward them all my spam folder.
I just got one.
Yeah.
I subscribed to a dating website. Dang it.
All right. Until next time, everyone, please take care.
You've been listening to Matt Fanslow, Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Matt on your favorite listening app. He's very interested in what you have to say. Let him know what you'd like him to cover and come on the show. Matt is all for advancing the aftermarket. Find Matt Fanslow on social media and connect or on aftermarketradionetwork.com.